I often said. This is the 95 companion, so it only has generations in it, and I've had it since 1995. But this is not a geek out on the companion. This is what I was promising myself I would do, because in a previous trivia episode, I pulled this card on the next gen episode, Aquiel, and I thought, oh, this is an episode that gets a bad rap. This is a bad episode, right? And then I began to ask myself, why is this a bad episode? So I rewatched it, read up a little bit about it here and there. I took some notes, and I'm going to share my thoughts on Aquiel. And my main thought is, this is not a bad episode. This episode does not deserve to be in a top 10 list of the worst TNG episodes. Now, this is not a great episode. It's a forgettable episode. And I have to ask myself where I was when I watched this back in 93, when it originally aired. I watched it, and I forgot about it. I feel the same way about that Voyager episode where he becomes a lizard. They become, Janeway and Paris become lizards. Threshold. Yeah, that was like a so-so episode, but it certainly wasn't worth all of the disdain. But maybe I'll do Threshold later. But Aquiel, my rational mind wants to say, I don't get it. What's going on here? My cynical mind says, oh, there's something else going on here. That must be why people hate this episode. I don't know. Maybe it's an episode that deserves a sigh. I didn't find it cringe. Maybe others would find some cringe elements. There's plenty of other Trek I found more cringeworthy, and I'll have to ask myself why as I go through this. But this is Aquiel. To understand Aquiel and the intentions behind it, you got to go back to a 1944 movie called Laura. Recently, as of the time I'm making this, you could watch it on Hulu. I watched it by accident, even before I thought about Aquiel again. And it's a so-so noir movie, typical of the time, where you see it's kind of a murder mystery. And then the female protagonist goes, she's missing, but she thinks, I'm really doing Laura justice here. Okay, so the female protagonist is believed to be murdered, but turns out she just went away. And then when she comes back, she's a suspect in the murder of a person who we don't know is murdered yet, but it's kind of quite clear. Noir movies, not my specialty. I know some folks that love them, and I appreciate that. But you get the twists and turns, which are, in retrospect, kind of obvious. I don't really know how Laura ages. That's a story for another time. The cinematography in Laura is great. You don't even have to know a lot about cinematography to go, this black and white, everything's in focus. This is something else. That alone makes the movie worth watching. But anyway, it was that element where, okay, is the female protagonist that the detective is kind of falling in love with, is she the killer or not? That's the mystery of Laura. And the detective in that movie falls in love with the female Laura before he meets her, because he's going through her diary, because she's supposed to be dead. Okay, those are themes we see in Aquiel. That's where the Laura comes in, right? So in this episode, briefly as I outline in my head, we go to a relay station. It's nice to see that Epsilon 9 is still alive and kicking, or at least reborn after Star Trek TMP. That aside. And there's this gelatinous blob of human remains on the floor. And there were some assumptions made in this movie where it's this lieutenant, Aquiel's like superior officer, there's a lot of beats that don't work, so it doesn't make it a great episode, right? But okay, let's get through it. Long story short, I think Booby Trap has a lot more cringe than Aquiel if you're dealing with Geordi falling in love with other women who aren't there. Um, but So Geordi has to go through the personal logs because he believes that Aquiel is dead. Geordi cops to this once he meets Aquiel. They're talking. She is understandably initially not okay with it, but then gradually, within a time frame of maybe a minute, seems okay with it because what can one do? There's certainly nothing stopping folks from doing personal logs in Starfleet, but that helps you. Laura had the diaries. This is personal logs. Those are the comparisons. Now I got to go to my notes, but let me try to get through the rest of the episode. So when Aquiel comes back, she's a spunky junior grade lieutenant who goes her own way, and therefore she must not be Starfleet already because she's just not having it. She's not taking flack from folks, and I guess that makes her distasteful in the eyes of either the folks that like to put this episode on top 10 worst list or whatever Riker's got going on in this episode, or however Cliff, Boyle, or Braga, Moore, and Taylor are trying to put together. LeVar Burton's classic critique of Next Gen is most of the writers had some difficulty trying to write for African Americans. That is a valid criticism when we're looking at Aquiel, because a lot of I'm not going to call it back. Well, maybe I'm going to call it. I just don't see the reasoning, but it's difficult not to draw parallels with Discovery when you see some of the disdain aimed at Aquiel that it doesn't deserve. Okay. So yes, it's uneven. There's a mystery unfolding that is like, is this really a mystery? Let me look through my notes. So yeah, we have based on a cursory online look over, creepy romance. Laura's a creepy romance too. That's where it comes from. But yes, LeVar Burton's Geordi, and the Sheikh he did not get in Next Gen seems to be saddled, much like Chekhov was always saddled to Scream, into let's do a creepy romance with Geordi. He had the one date in Transformations with the female lead from Doc Hollywood, Julie Warner. Oh, if I got that name right, I could go look in the Book of the Word right now. Check that. Transfigurations. That's what we're looking at here. So this is where Geordi has the official okay. Well, kind of. Yeah, the second date's okay. Yeah, Julie Warner, Christine. I got Julie Warner's name right. Okay, cool. Yeah, he has that second date because Transfiguration guy gives him the confidence to go on the date. So this is post Booby Trap. But then we have to bring Leah Brahms back. In that other episode. I get it. I can totally read, and anyone can, the creepiness of it. But is that based on past creepiness we see with Geordi with the holodeck? Or is this just a legitimate, we thought you were dead, I've got to look through your journals. Now, what could be creepy is that Geordi's taking her out to 10 forward. That Geordi creates an idea of this person who's dead, and just like in the movie Laura. So yeah, okay, as I work through the criticism, I see that it is somewhat legitimate. It is an uncomfortableness there. Sorry, I'm looking at my last point that goes beyond just the Laura parallels. Let's see what other people said about this. Okay, reading personal logs, kind of already addressed that. Where's this other lieutenant in this? Okay, we couldn't read his logs for some reason, but here's the thing: when they look at the glob of goo and Crusher's like, this is a human being, everyone just automatically think, oh, it's Aquiel. It's not this other lieutenant here. I don't I don't understand that at all. Where did the other lieutenant go? So maybe this is a plot hole. You know, Farron's Nitpicker's Guide for Next Generation, folks. This came out in '93. You know, the same year this episode came out. There's nothing in here about this being such a terrible episode back in the day. We got some plot oversights. We got some continuity problems. Okay. You know. So, why it doesn't work is because of too many changes. So the whole mystery about Aquiel not being alive, I know that really doesn't even matter, because then we have to move to the coalescent life form that we don't know, and we forget about the dog. So yeah, Geordi and women, I did my 2 cents on that. That deserves its own episode, unfortunately. I would have preferred to see Aquiel in the last episode of TNG. You know, when future Geordi goes to the vineyard. But no, it has to be Leah, because she was in 2 episodes. I don't know. This does not deserve to be in the worst episodes. I don't understand. I do understand why, perhaps. But based on the merits we have here in the episode, it is not strong, but it's certainly not eyes in the dark, cringe, or crusher. Yeah, you notice if you look at a general top 10 list of next gen episodes, they all feature the female leads. Is that that's not good. I don't know. Shades of Grey is the worst one. So yeah, but there are a lot of Troy and Crusher episodes here. Maybe half of them out of the 10. I'm like, is that quite correct? What about the episode where Alexander and Alexandra Troy are in the mud bath? You know, that's certainly worthy of a top 10 worst list. But no, with the little mime and okay. Eyes in the dark. I'm getting away from my point here. What's Riker's issue in this episode? It's difficult to figure out. He seems to make snap judgments. We don't like this lieutenant because she's just not Starfleet enough. She doesn't work. And then in turn, we see it here in the original write-up, and you can find it on Memory Alpha. So like Renee Jones, I think Jerry Taylor's quote was that she just wasn't a good fit. And I'm like, well, Cliff Boyle needs to direct his actors. You can't just blame the actor for not quite getting there. It's the director's job to get the performance out of the actor. But you're also looking at it. This you have a week to do this episode. So I didn't find her out of place. It was refreshing. Yeah. Person. At this episode as it is. So is the assumption that this coalesced creature that can mimic human and non-human animal forms, that's not a sentient being? There's no sentience there? We just automatically get the phasers out and go boom, and so that's not an individual. That we just hop on that assumption there. This comes also after I'm watching the mid-season finale of Discovery Season 4, where we have a whole hour of discussing what should we do after this anomaly destroyed a planet. It's the same dilemma here. We just kind of hop right on over this is a life form, but I guess it's not. It just coalesces and it takes on the shape and it has to change shape. But it is a sentient being. It took on the attributes of the dog to communicate. We assume it took on Lieutenant, who's already dead, superior officer here. What happened with that? This is not as bad as it seems. So reevaluate what you see when you read a top 10 list. And a shout out to Keith R.A. DeCandido. If I find his write-up of this episode again, maybe I'll put it in there, comes to some same conclusions I was coming to. Is it a great episode? Certainly not. It's average. It's a kind of forgettable TNG episode. And what surprises me is that it's bookend in between. Well, it's kind of not, but yeah, we get close to Tapestry after this episode. And I'll take Aquiel over Tapestry any day of the week. Oh, there's Tapestry. Yeah, Face of the Enemy. Good Troy episode. We certainly could have used a lot more of those. And I think this might be Marina Sirtis's favorite of the bunch, too. Thus, my thoughts on Aquiel. Judge for yourself. It could be a fun episode, even with all its imperfections, but it's not one that deserves the outright ridicule it does, assuming it does have that. I suppose, again, I'm left with my recap. Yeah, maybe there's some creepiness with Geordi here, but that's a bit. There's not creepiness in the logs. There's maybe a bit falling in love with somebody he thinks is dead, but that's kind of just romanticizing this idea here. So, yeah, writers had some issues with Geordi. That aside, there we go. Thoughts? What do you think? Am I totally off? I'm working through the issues. I just want to have us reevaluate and kind of re-see what are we talking about here.